The scarcity of oil and the abundance of war. December 18th, 1944, 0600 hours, Malmedy, Belgium. The King Tiger tank's engine groaned, rattled, then went silent. SS Obersturmbannführer Klaus Richter slammed his fist against the turret hatch, the metallic clang echoing through the pre-dawn darkness. His driver, Unterscharführer Franz Keller, attempted to restart the 750 horsepower Mercedes engine. Nothing. The fuel gauge read empty. Hauptscharführer Keller called up from his compartment, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. The auxiliary tank is also dry, Herr Obersturmbannführer. Richter climbed down from his command tank, his boots crunching on the frozen Belgian soil. Around him, the most powerful armored spearhead the Wehrmacht had assembled for Operation Autumn Mist, the Ardennes offensive, sat motionless. 72 tanks, 160 half-tracks, and nearly 6,000 of Germany's most elite Waffen-SS soldiers, all paralyzed by empty fuel tanks. Through the morning mist, Richter could see the abandoned American position ahead. Malmedy, a critical supply depot for the U.S. 106th Infantry Division. The Americans had fled so quickly they'd left fires still burning in oil drums, coffee still hot in metal cups, and there, lined up like a gift from the god of war himself, stood rows upon rows of jerrycans, thousands of them, the distinctive olive drab American fuel containers. Richter approached slowly, almost reverently. His adjutant, Hauptsturmführer Otto Schmidt, pried open one can and sniffed. Benzin, Schmidt exclaimed, high-octane gasoline, as his men began the frantic work of refueling their vehicles. Richter walked among the stockpile, counting. The mathematics were staggering. 60,000 gallons, enough to fuel his entire Kampfgruppe for the push to the Meuse River, enough to potentially change the course of the offensive. The Americans had abandoned more fuel in this single depot than most German divisions had received in the past 6 months. But as Richter stood among this bounty, watching his men pour American fuel into German tanks, a crushing realization settled over him like the morning fog. If the Americans could afford to abandon such quantities, if they could leave behind what Germany would guard with entire divisions, then this war was already over. Germany hadn't just miscalculated, Germany had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of its enemy. The industrial imbalance. 6 months before Richter's discovery at Malmedy in June 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments and War Production, had presented the Führer with a report that should have ended all offensive operations immediately. Germany's synthetic fuel production, the lifeblood of the Wehrmacht, had been systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. The Leuna works, which had produced 180,000 tons of fuel in April, managed only 6,000 tons by September. The hydrogenation plants at Pulitz, Blechhammer and Brooks were operating at less than 10% capacity. The numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. In 1944, the United States produced 1.9 billion barrels of crude oil. Germany, including all synthetic production and captured Romanian fields, managed 35 million barrels, less than 2% of American production. The Third Reich was attempting to wage mechanized warfare with horse-drawn logistics, while America was drowning its armies in petroleum abundance. Major Ernst Lehmann of the Wehrmacht's Logistics Command had calculated that the Ardennes offensive would require 5 million gallons of fuel to reach Antwerp. Hitler allocated 5.5 million gallons, but only 40% was actually delivered due to transportation problems. The German High Command was betting the entire offensive on capturing enemy supplies, a strategy that revealed terminal weakness rather than strength. The Americans, meanwhile, had constructed a petroleum pipeline system across France called Pluto, Pipeline Under the Ocean, and the Red Ball Express, a massive truck convoy system that delivered 13,000 tons of supplies daily to the front lines. By December 1944, American forces in Europe were consuming 1.3 million gallons of fuel per day and receiving 1.5 million gallons. They were accumulating reserves while fighting. The folly of the plan. Klaus Richter was not a fool. At 30 years old, he was one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen-SS, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, a veteran of the Eastern Front, where he had learned that in modern warfare, fuel was more precious than ammunition. His Kampfgruppe had been designated the Schwerpunkt, the decisive point of the entire Ardennes offensive. On December 15th, 2 days before the offensive, Richter attended the final briefing at Trier. General Josef Steiner, commanding the 7th SS Panzer Army, was blunt. "You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies." The fuel allocation for Kampfgruppe Richter was 35,000 gallons, enough for 55 miles of combat operations. The distance to the Meuse was 68 miles. The mathematics of failure were built into the plan from the beginning. As his column prepared to advance on December 16th, Richter issued strict orders. Tanks would operate in single file to conserve fuel. Engines would be shut off during any halt longer than 7 minutes, and the capture of American fuel dumps was priority 1, above even tactical objectives. The contrast with American operations could not have been starker. That same morning, Captain George Wilson of the U.S. 744th Tank Battalion, stationed just 25 miles from Richter's starting position, recorded in his unit diary, "Received fuel resupply 9,000 gallons. Fourth delivery this week. Storage tanks already at capacity." The delay and the discovery, December 16th, 1944, 0600 hours. The German artillery barrage that opened Operation Autumn Mist used more ammunition in 3 hours than the Wehrmacht had allocated for entire operations earlier in the war. But even this impressive display masked critical shortages. Richter's column began moving at 10 a.m., already behind schedule. The roads, which on German maps appeared as highways, were narrow country lanes, many unpaved. Within hours, traffic jams developed as vehicles designed for the Russian steppes struggled through the Ardennes forest. At Stavelot, Richter's first objective, they encountered unexpected resistance from a single American engineer platoon. 20 men who held up the most powerful German armored column for nearly 12 hours. During the delay, Richter's vehicles sat idling, burning precious fuel. When they finally broke through and reached Malmedy at dawn on December 18th, Richter's column had covered 22 miles and consumed 45% of their fuel. At this rate, they would run dry before reaching the halfway point to the Meuse. The American supply depot at Malmedy was not even a primary facility. It was a forward supply point for the 106th Infantry Division, what the U.S. Army classified as a Class 3A depot, a temporary fuel station. Yet what Richter found there exceeded the monthly fuel allocation for an entire German panzer division. Hauptsturmführer Schmidt later testified, we found mountains of jerry cans, each containing 5 gallons of gasoline. They were stacked 4 meters high, extending for perhaps 250 meters. The Americans had not even attempted to destroy them. The captured fuel was high-octane aviation gasoline mixed with motor fuel, 85 octane or higher. German vehicles, especially the temperamental Mercedes engines in the King Tiger tanks, were designed for 72 octane fuel. The American gasoline was actually too good, causing engine problems in several German vehicles. As Richter's men refueled, they made more discoveries. Sergeant Dieter Haas found shipping manifests in the depot office. He could read English, having worked in his father's import business before the war. The papers indicated this fuel had been shipped from Oklahoma to Boston, across the Atlantic to Southampton, across the Channel to Le Havre, and trucked 450 miles to Malmedy. The journey of over 6,500 miles had taken less than 7 weeks. I showed the papers to Obersturmbannführer Richter, Haas recalled in a 1977 interview. He read them twice, then crumpled them up. He said nothing, but his face went pale. We both understood what this meant. Private Joseph Trapp found a stack of Stars and Stripes newspapers, dated December 16th, just 2 days old. The headline celebrated the opening of a new fuel pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun, capable of delivering 350,000 gallons per day. A single pipeline delivering more fuel daily than Kampfgruppe Richter would use in the entire offensive. The flames of Stavelot. To comprehend the shock of Richter's discovery, one must understand Germany's fuel situation by late 1944. Since May, Allied bombing had reduced synthetic fuel production by 95%. The Luftwaffe was grounding aircraft for lack of aviation fuel. Pilot training had been cut from 300 flight hours to 50 hours. The German Navy's surface fleet had effectively ceased operations. U-boats were fitted with snorkels to conserve diesel by running on batteries longer. On the home front, German civilians had not seen private automobile traffic since 1942. Gasoline was so precious that the Gestapo investigated black market theft of individual liters. Farmers were returning to horse-drawn plows. Meanwhile, the United States was producing 65% of the world's oil. The Permian Basin oil field alone produced more petroleum than all of German-occupied Europe. With the 60,000 gallons captured at Malmedy, Richter's columns surged forward. They reached Bullingen by noon on December 18th, capturing additional supplies, rations, ammunition, and most importantly, maps showing other American fuel depots in the area. But the maps revealed a disturbing truth. The Americans had fuel stockpiles everywhere. Every major crossroads had a depot. The U.S. First Army alone had 4 million gallons in reserve. Richter pushed on to Ligneville, where his forces would execute the Malmedy massacre, killing 84 American prisoners. Even this war crime was connected to fuel desperation. Richter later claimed he could not spare gasoline to transport prisoners. By evening on December 18th, Richter's spearhead reached Stavelot, site of a major American fuel depot containing over 2.5 million gallons. Here was enough fuel to guarantee reaching the Meuse. But as the first German vehicles approached, American engineers were already at work. Captain David Miller of the 292nd Engineer Combat Battalion had received warning of the German approach. His orders were simple: deny fuel to the enemy at all costs. The Stavelot depot contained 2,500,000 gallons of gasoline in jerry cans stacked across 17 acres. At 6 p.m. on December 18th, as Richter's advance guard approached, Captain Miller gave the order. Engineers poured gasoline trails between the stacks. White phosphorus grenades were distributed. Technical Sergeant Robert Saltis threw the first grenade. The explosion was immediate and tremendous, he recalled. A wall of fire shot up maybe 150 feet. Within minutes, the entire depot was an inferno. Richter's lead tanks arrived to find a pillar of black smoke rising 1,500 feet into the sky. The fire would burn for 4 days, consuming enough fuel to have powered Richter's entire division to Antwerp and back. Unterscharführer Keller described the scene. The Obersturmbannführer stood on his tank turret watching the flames. He said nothing for perhaps 7 minutes. Then he climbed down and told me, "They can afford to burn 2.5 million gallons to deny them to us. What are we doing here?" Across the Ardennes, American engineers were destroying fuel dumps rather than risk capture. At Trois Ponts, 1.5 million gallons burned. At Spa, 3 million gallons were destroyed. In total, Americans deliberately destroyed over 9 million gallons during the first week, more than Germany had allocated for the entire operation. The inevitable defeat. The ability to casually destroy millions of gallons was rooted in a supply system beyond German comprehension. The Red Bull Express had delivered 420,000 tons of supplies using 6,500 trucks operating round the clock. Each truck consumed 45 gallons daily. The operation itself burned more fuel than German Army Group B received monthly. By December 1944, the Motor Transport Service employed 250 truck companies operating on color-coded routes. The system delivered 22,000 tons of supplies daily, including 3,500 tons of fuel. Colonel James Snyder, Chief Logistics Officer for 1st Army, recorded on December 19th, "Fuel receipts yesterday 1,900,000 gallons. Fuel issued 1,700,000 gallons. Net gain to reserves 200,000 gallons." The pipeline system was even more impressive. Operation Pluto had laid pipes across the English Channel, pumping 1.2 million gallons daily from Britain. A network of pipelines extended inland. The Cherbourg-Paris line delivered 900,000 gallons daily. The Seine line moved 700,000 gallons. By December 1944, Allied forces in northwest Europe were consuming 8 million gallons daily while receiving 8.7 million gallons. They were building reserves during offensive operations. As Richter pushed deeper into Belgium on December 19th, the impossibility of the German position became clear. At Petitier, they captured another depot. 6,000 gallons consumed in 3 hours of combat. King Tiger tanks consumed 3 gallons per mile in battle. Panthers burned 2 gallons per mile. In the difficult Ardennes terrain, consumption increased by 40%. Hauptfeldwebel Otto Dingler, maintenance officer for the 2nd SS Panzer Regiment, recorded, "By noon on December 19th, we had consumed 75,000 gallons since the offensive began. We had captured perhaps 65,000 gallons. We were operating at a deficit." The Americans, monitoring German radio traffic through ultra-intercepts, knew Richter's fuel situation. General Omar Bradley ordered all units, "Enemy critically short of fuel. Destroy all gasoline stocks threatened by capture." That same day, American C-47s flew 350 sorties delivering supplies to Bastogne, including 180,000 gallons of fuel. Americans were flying more fuel to a surrounded garrison than Richter's entire Kampfgruppe possessed. By December 20th, as Richter's forces engaged defenders at Stoumont, the fuel crisis had become critical. Tanks were being abandoned with empty fuel tanks rather than from battle damage. Richter consolidated his remaining fuel, perhaps 10,000 gallons, enough for one engagement or retreat, but not both. Meanwhile, Allied planners were preparing for January operations. Brigadier General Frank Gilland requested 250 million gallons for the coming month. The request was approved without discussion. And the end of the spearhead. On December 21st, Richter received a radio message. Fuel convoy destroyed by Allied aircraft. No resupply possible. Continue with available resources. Richter called his commanders together. Sturmbannführer Werner Pohl was blunt. We have fuel for perhaps 25 kilometers. The Meuse is 40 kilometers away. According to Hauptsturmführer Schmidt's testimony, the Obersturmbannführer said, "Gentlemen, we have discovered we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we received for this entire operation. What we captured at Malmedy, which seemed miraculous, was nothing to them. We cannot win." This realization was spreading. General Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding 5th Panzer Army, later wrote, "When I learned Americans had destroyed 9 million gallons rather than risk our capturing it, I knew the offensive had failed before it began." Colonel Georg von Schönder, captured December 24th, told interrogators, "Your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen chocolate in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons. We measure by the liter. How can we fight such abundance?" By December 22nd, Richter was surrounded at La Glaise, his tanks immobile. American forces surrounding him, the 30th Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne, 3rd Armored, had a combined fuel allocation of 360,000 gallons for December 22nd alone. Richter had perhaps 1,500 gallons. Private First Class Richard McKinney wrote home, "We've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Our captain jokes we use more fuel heating coffee than they have for tanks." The American response demonstrated industrial warfare at its peak. Patton's 3rd Army pivot north required 400,000 gallons just for redeployment, considered impossible by German standards, yet accomplished in 3 days. December 24th brought clear weather. Allied aircraft flew 2,200 sorties, each burning fuel at rates that would have grounded the Luftwaffe for weeks. P-47s consumed 350 gallons per hour. B-26s burned 250 gallons hourly. One day's air operations consumed more than Germany's entire offensive allocation. On the night of December 24th to 25th, Richter abandoned his vehicles and escaped on foot. Of 120 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, 40 remained operational but immobilized. These were destroyed with remaining ammunition. Oberscharführer Heinz Goldschmidt described the scene. "We drained the last fuel from all vehicles, maybe 250 gallons total. The Obersturmbannführer personally destroyed his command tank. Millions of Reichsmarks of equipment destroyed by empty fuel tanks. Of 6,000 men who began with Kampfgruppe Richter, approximately 800 returned. They had advanced 62 miles, captured several depots, and discovered the truth about Allied logistics." And the legacy of abundance news of Richter's discoveries spread rapidly through German command. On December 27th, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring received reports on captured American supplies. His chief of staff recorded Kesselring's reaction. The Field Marshal read the quantities twice: 60,000 gallons at Malmedy, 2.5 million burned at Stavelot, 9 million destroyed, D rather than captured. He said, "We are not fighting the same war." The fuel crisis was symptomatic of a larger truth. By 1944, America produced 55% of world manufacturing. A new aircraft every 4 minutes, a ship daily, a tank every 6 minutes. Petroleum production statistics were overwhelming. United States 1.9 billion barrels. Soviet Union 115 million barrels. Germany, including synthetic, 35 million barrels. Japan 3 million barrels. The Axis combined produced less than 2% of American petroleum. December 25th, 1944. As Richter's men slipped through American lines on foot, abandoning 40 tanks, 75 half-tracks, and 180 other vehicles, the magnitude crystallized. They had captured 60,000 gallons, seemingly miraculous, only to learn it was meaningless to an enemy who could burn millions. Unterscharführer Keller reflected in 1975. That morning at Malmedy, finding American fuel, we celebrated like winning the lottery. By evening, learning about Stavelot burning, we understood we'd already lost. Americans had so much they could destroy what we died to possess. The 60,000 gallons was less than a single American armored division consumed in 2 days. Less than the Red Ball Express burned in 4 hours, a rounding error in Allied daily consumption. Major General Leo Collins later wrote, "Germans' desperate attempts to capture fuel revealed their miscalculation. They assumed we valued fuel as they did, as irreplaceable. They couldn't comprehend we had so much we could burn millions rather than risk tactical disadvantage." Operation Autumn Mist failed through immutable mathematics of industrial warfare. The offensive consumed approximately 3 million gallons, 45% overall allocation, the difference from captured supplies. During the same period, Americans consumed 280 million gallons, nearly 100 times more. The King Tiger tank sits in L'Eglis's museum, fuel gauge empty, a monument to when tactical excellence met logistical reality and lost. Visitors ask why such powerful tanks were abandoned. The answer: no fuel,